Hello, and welcome to Instant Insights, Global Data's strategic intelligence podcast. At Global Data Strategic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm Stu Robarts, and today, ahead of International Women's Day on Saturday, we're looking at the growth of women's sport, what's needed to maintain that growth, and some of the challenges that are still faced. Our guest today is Beth Paretta, VP of Sporting at the all-electric motor racing series Formula E. Beth joins us from Miami, where she is for the series Evo Sessions event, at which 11 of the world's most followed personalities were being put behind the wheel of Formula E's Gen 3 Evo race car. She joined Formula E in 2024, having previously served as a member of the FIA's Women in Motorsport Commission, co-founded the Women in Motorsport's North America community, and set up the women-run, women-driven Paretta Autosport team. Beth, thanks for joining us ahead of International Women's Day. To begin with, could you tell us about the progress you've seen for women's motorsport and women's sports more broadly during your career, and in particular in recent years where there seems to have been this real acceleration in growth?
Absolutely. It's really been accelerating, I'd say, just the pace of growth and the fact that more and more people are talking about it. I think of even in my career, if you look 20 years ago, 25 years ago, where we were, and then even where we were 5 years ago, there's sort of been this nice acceleration to seeing more women in the paddock across all roles. I know the focus is always on getting more women behind the wheel as drivers, and that is important. But even personally, in my professional endeavors were to try to lift the veil on all of the careers that exist in the paddock, because it's that idea of like, we just need the best and brightest and people that are passionate about it. And if we could let people know that there's space here for them and that we want you and we need you in our sport, then, it's a welcoming environment. So I think it's kind of a two-pronged thing. One is just getting women into the industry across so many different, parts of it to make it all happen. And then the other focus is on drivers. And I think you're just seeing a lot of initiatives, and I think the typical competitor in us is if one series or one team is pushing the boundaries, maybe others will want to follow because they don't want to be left in the dust.
And how do you find motorsports compares to other sports in this area, particularly as someone who's been in the industry and seen it for so long yourself?
Well, I think that the sort of the magic of motorsport, and this is the thing that we're trying to remind people, is that for all of the professional sports we think of, this is something that's actually co-ed. We can have everybody participating on the same track, and again, I say that beyond the drivers, because respectfully, you're looking at a race engineer or a mechanic, and all of those, anyone that is a proper racing fan or has worked in it certainly knows how big a team is and how critical all of those roles are. And then that's just a team, right? Then you look at running a circuit, running a series, all of those, all those ancillary things that kind of make our show happen. But I think that that progress is probably the most remarkable, and it's been the unique proposition of motorsport is that it can be men and women side by side. And I think that's the coolest thing, because no other pro sport that's this big. I mean, I know equestrian and sailing, you can have some co-ed teams, but to be a major sport on broadcast around the world, that's kind of the part of our magic.
Speaking more broadly about sport in general, there have obviously been big strides made in recent years, but are there any challenges that still stand out to you as being major things for women's sport to overcome?
I think the obvious challenges are, people, there's a lot of question of like, will women ever get to the highest echelons of motorsport? Will they win, will they take podiums? Will they win championships? I would argue that they would. We know, I do honestly still think that the biggest challenge is opportunity. Just getting a shot. We have a saying, which I think is true, if we're talking about drivers, women are hired based on their potential and men are hired based on their experience. And when you're hiring somebody based on their potential, it's sitting around a table and guessing what they can do instead of giving them an opportunity to grow and get their legs under them. There's a lot of drivers, a lot of male drivers who get opportunity after opportunity, and they might have had a so-so season. But, if you see a woman having, a poor race result here or there, she's often not asked back. And if you were to look at, what solves that? Well, it's opportunity. It's
Beth's audio cuts out here, but she gives the example of seven-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton.
Was in the McLaren system when he was like, what, 13 years old. I mean, that's somebody recognizing talent, but realizing that it needed to be nurtured and cultivated. And that was somebody, yes, taking a gamble, but I mean, it was a calculated gamble. And then they put the resource around him to develop him into a world-class racing driver. And could you do that with more people? Of course you could. Of course you could. And so I think one of the things that will help in time is getting more women in positions of leadership, making those decisions, making those hiring decisions. So I think the more women we get and the more willing men to invest in others, it's not an issue of physical difference as much as people like to kind of try to argue that. I mean, it hasn't been proven. So I don't know. I think a lot of it is there's a lot of opportunity.
In terms of those on-track seats, if you like, there are obviously changes happening, for example, the F1 Academy and whatnot. Can you talk about some of the initiatives you see happening in motorsports in that sense?
Yeah, things like F1 Academy, W Series a few years ago, ultimately, why any progress, I still think any progress is good progress because that's how many more seats that, women are getting track time. The solution is always going to be seat time. And it's great that those series exist, but what I want to see is, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when the cameras are off, those women just running laps at a track. There's no substitute for seat time. And as you look at men and women, there are absolutely women racing drivers who they all have a story of, when they were coming up the ranks karting and then, at like F4, where they were absolutely beating men who are now, F1 drivers or world championships. And like, they absolutely have the trophies to speak for it. But it's usually that then when they go up a higher rung on the ladder, they just didn't get the same opportunity or seat time. So I think if people want to say like, what's the easy fix? It's, all of those academies and having more of those where it's just allowing people behind the wheel and giving them that nurturing time that, some of these world champions have had.
There's a recent Women in Sport report from Global Data that suggests that women's sport is at a pivotal point and that broadcast visibility is key to driving the next stage of growth through generating revenue. To what extent does that resonate with you guys at Formula E? And are there any other growth factors you think are particularly key?
Absolutely. I think as you see any sport grow, I mean, ultimately sport is entertainment. And so it has to be good. It has to be entertaining for people to tune in. And what's great is whether you look at, if you look in the UK and you've got Premier League and then you've got all the women's football teams. And if the game is good, people will watch a good game. You have in the US where I'm from, basketball is huge and women's basketball has just been growing and growing because it's just a really good game. And the thing that's interesting is it's a different game, right? So you can appreciate it for what it is. Again, the uniqueness of motorsport is that we can be integrated into the same race. So, I mean, ultimately, no one really cares. They shouldn't really care as long as it's good racing and the drivers and the engineers and, the cars are fast and you've got, things wheel to wheel and you don't know who's going to win. I don't think anybody would object to, whoever's, got the helmet on because, to be fair, really good racing drivers, it's like, game recognizes game, right? So they respect, a good racing driver respects another good racing driver. And to be fair, like when you're in it, the gender thing really doesn't matter, but meaning it doesn't come up as much as you think it would anymore, but does it matter for the end product? I think so, because, ultimately this is still a business. And if you want to grow an audience, would it maybe be compelling to a wider swath of the population if they felt like it kind of was for them or that they could relate to it? Probably. It's not gonna. It shouldn't turn anybody off if they're able to, get in the car and go fast and be within. Racing's a meritocracy. So if you can be fast, great. Let's just get you the opportunity to really, hone your skills. And then if you can do it, you can do it.
Formula E ran its first all-women test last year, and you've got another one coming up as part of your long-term strategy for greater inclusion on that front. Can you just talk a little bit about the upcoming test, what that means for the sport, and a little bit about that long-term strategy as well?
So we're really excited at Formula E because came out of a discussion of what can we do to get more women into the sport. And as a series, there's things you can do, things you can't do, right? Because we're not hiring drivers, but if we can create opportunities for our teams and sometimes, affectionately push our teams along to think a little bit more broadly, those are the things that we can affect. And so what we did in the preseason test for season 11 is we had a half day where it was this all women's test. So every team had to put women in their race cars, and it pushed them to kind of, get to know some of the women drivers out there and figure out who was available, who they would like to contract to drive their car. It pushed some of them to create relationships that they didn't have, which was kind of the point. And we're excited to say that going into our preseason for next year, and so to be Q4 of 2025, so that kind of the preview of season 12, we're going to extend our women's test to be a full day because we had such success with it. Now, the idea of the women's test is to just give these women the opportunity, again, build these bridges, get them to know the teams, get them to know our series, get them to consider our series as an option for themselves. And now some of these women are coming out of F1 Academy. Can you take someone out of F1 Academy and drop them into Formula E? No, it's a big jump, but it's just getting their familiarization. That then if they're forging a relationship with the team, maybe then they can become a test driver. Maybe they can be part of the extended family. They can get some simulator time and then kind of grow from there. But respectfully, F1 Academy is F4. So, there's a few more rungs on the ladder. That's actually one of the things I'm tasked with, is figuring out how to fill in those rungs on the ladder. Because I think that to be fair, men or women, we definitely need more. Coming into Formula E is its own skill set. And so we need drivers to have more experience in saving energy, the regenerative power that Formula E takes. And it would be great if we could have, the sort of the for lack of a better term, like an FE2 and an FE3, so that they can just climb the natural ladder that you would in any other, series around the world. And if we can kind of fill in that gap, that would be helpful for everybody. Because the one thing to remember too with ladders, it's not just a driver, it's also that engineer and that mechanic. So all of those are learning experiences that nobody gets hired right out of university and goes and becomes, a race engineer for a top team right out of the gate. You need to kind of, learn, get your experience and learn the sport, learn the platform. And so the more that we do that, that's an investment in our future collectively. And then the byproduct of that is that if we can weave those opportunities in for more women, then in the long run, we'll have more women represented too.
You mentioned earlier the WNBA, and I'm interested in this idea about how sports often, or even competitions, borrow from each other on occasion. They'll see ideas in one that works in another, that sort of thing. Do you guys find that Formula E looks at how other sports are building inclusion and borrow ideas here or there? Or do you compare yourselves or see how things might work for you where they've worked elsewhere?
I mean, I think everybody subliminally takes ideas from other places, whether we even realize it or not. And yes, if we could have a Caitlin Clark in Formula E, would that change things? Yeah, and I think everybody's always looking for that magic moment. And we've had a little bit of that over the years in racing. There's those moments where you have a woman leading a race, or a woman taking pole, like Jamie Chadwick. Took pole and then won a race last year in Indy Next. And is that something that, made the news? Absolutely. I'm striving for the day when that doesn't make the news because it's so commonplace. And we'll get there. I do still think we'll get there. And, it's easy for us to get discouraged and think that we want progress to be faster, but I think it's also important to see how far we've come. But it's that balance. See how far we've come, but see how much further we have to go. But yeah, I think we do. When you see other sports capitalizing on it, I think it just proves that the concept matters and that it works, right? Because ultimately, sponsors are making hay with it, as they should. I mean, this again, it is a business, and so there's proof of concept out there. So this isn't some sort of harebrained scheme. I mean, we know that it works. In fact, for what it's worth, I remember when I was trying to convince people about my, with my IndyCar team and saying, all right, if you had a team of majority women in the Indy 500, it's going to be groundbreaking and it's going to make the news and it's going to make the mainstream news. And, I remember talking to people early on and some people absolutely got it and agreed, and other people you could see they weren't really, they didn't know what I was describing. Like they needed to see it to understand. And then when I announced my team, the amount of media, and I mean, the fact that it's like on the ESPN sports ticker, and then it's on, it's on CNN and it's picked up globally. And literally, we were in People magazine and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, an IndyCar team. Like, when has that ever happened? We had a Sports Illustrated writer embedded with us for a few days. Sports Illustrated hadn't written about IndyCar for like 10 years. And at the end of the day, we announced our team in January, we race in May, and we, captured all the media post race too. So through August, and my little team had 6.8 billion media impressions, which was more than every other team combined. And it tells you that people are always interested in things that are new, but ultimately the reason we watch sport is because it's human stories. And I set out to prove that women could pit a car and they could do it. They could do a full pit stop and change tires and fuel a car the same as the men. What was ridiculous is I had just hired them and they had no experience, and we trained them in 3 months. And that was sort of the remarkable story. But what's beautiful about those kinds of things is you can't fake it. You either have to, you have to do it, or you can't. And as much as I say that I created my team and put all this effort in because I wanted to show young girls what was possible. The reality is I also want to show young boys, because if they see it, they don't think anything different. And they see that this is, now my team wasn't 100% women. Purposely, we had veteran men, but it's that idea of showing people working, side by side, shoulder to shoulder on a team. And a team only functions if everybody pulls their weight. And there's really no magic here. And I think, every day we're getting closer to just making it a reality. And I think it's good for us commercially, because ultimately, we want people to watch on TV, and we want people to buy a ticket and come sit in the stands and support the sponsors on the side of the car, and, have this little ecosystem being really healthy and fun. And I mean, ultimately, the reason why it's great to grow our audience is we want to keep doing this for years and years.
And just finally, you mentioned there about what the future looks like and not wanting it to be news, if you like. Can you talk about what the pathway to that looks like for you, what the steps are, and what the timescales look like in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember even when we announced our team and the fact that it was this, sort of curiosity. I remember, like the first practice days where all the teams were looking in the garage and seeing all these, women with ponytails, working on a car and having, grease on their hands. And I've said it, and I still maintain, like, my goal is that a team of majority women, or seeing a lot of women in the paddock, isn't the news story, and you're just focused on results. I think the most important step is opportunity, giving opportunity to taking a chance on somebody and getting them getting them the support and opportunity they need. And could we in the next 5 years have women full time in all different forms of racing? I mean, there are women competing right now. Like, this isn't this isn't like a, you look at sports car, you look at the road to Indy Next. There's 2 women in Indy Next this season. Sports car, which would be Le Mans, WEC, or IMSA, there are women competing in that and doing well and getting podiums. And we just need more of it. And I think I'm hoping that we're at the point now where there isn't really a counter argument. I mean, please, send me your cards and letters, I'm sure. But I mean, I would guarantee that most people in the paddock would say, if you can make the car go faster, you're hired.
I should imagine so. Beth, thanks very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And of course, happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day to you and everyone else. Thanks.
Thanks to Beth for those instant insights, and thanks to you for listening. From us at Global Data Strategic Intelligence, see you next time.